Hey there, fellow classic comic collectors. As always, I'm Scott Harris King, and today I'm back with a new haul video. This is a mishmash of all sorts of things. We got gifts, we got books from Kickstarter, we got back issues from comic stores, we got stuff from eBay. So it's a whole bunch of different stuff that I've sort of been hoarding up for a little while until I had enough stuff for a video. Real quick before I get into that, just a couple things. We're still just a little short of 1,100 subscribers. So if you haven't signed up yet as a subscriber, and if you haven't signed up yet for my 1,100 subscriber giveaway, the link is in the description down below. All you got to do is watch that video for the rules. Basically, just leave a comment on my 1,100 subscriber giveaway video where you ask me a question, and then you'll be entered to win a big box of random comics. Also, I wanted to mention that my new comic, Quest number 4, is coming out on Kickstarter in September. The link for that's also down below. Don't worry if you missed the first 3 issues, you can catch up on the whole saga. So if you're into swords and sorcery stuff, like Conan or Red Sonja, you want to check that out, you can just sign up again at the link down below so you don't miss anything. I'm going to have a special catch-up bundle where you can get all 4 issues for a special discounted price, combined shipping. So, looking forward to bringing that out and seeing you there. But now let's get to the comics. So, trying to figure out where to start here, and I think I'm going to start with the gifts. Now, this is something that a while ago, I did a video where I've been playing a lot of Fallout 76, and in the Fallout video game universe, there's a comic book company called Hubris Comics, and you can find the comics in game. And I built an in-game comic store with the virtual comics. Well, my wife actually, as a gift, found for me and bought for me these physical versions of the comics. Now, the inside is actually a notebook because there haven't actually been comics made of these. But there's 10 issues of their Conan series, Grognak the Barbarian, and she got me all 10 of those. Now, strangely, the numbers on the covers for these they're all issues like 16, 20, 22, and 24. They all have those numbers. Well, actually, there's one that says 14. But anyway, in the game, they're numbered 1 to 10, but for some reason, they're just like these random numbers. So I actually forget what order they go in. But I'll just show them to you because they're really cool. Obviously, they have the throwback style, so they look like the Conan comics from the Bronze Age, from the 70s. Got some Robert E. Howard influence on this one, which is Enter Mala, War Maiden of Mars. This is Lost in the Snows of Lust, which is clearly a reference to the Frost Giant's daughter. What sorcery this? The art on these covers is interesting because I get the sense that there's a couple different artists that worked on these, but it almost has like a late 60s sort of animation thing, almost like the Herculoids, or I'm just blanking, but those sort of late 60s action cartoons. Cometh the Trickster. Here's Blood on the Harp, which I think is actually issue 1, but it's numbered 16 here for some reason on the cover. And again, these are all notebooks, so I've got plenty of notebooks now for jotting down my own comic book ideas. Here's a great one, In the Bosom of the Corsair Queen, which is clearly a reference, of course, to Belit. I love the romance novel cover here. The Lair of the Virgin Eaters. And again, it looks like a different artist to me on this one than this one. Here's a Jungle of the Bat Babies. And so those are the 10. She also got me a bunch of other ones as well that aren't comic books. They're like different magazines from the universe. So I got a whole pile of these really cool, sort of like life imitating art, imitating life, imitating art. But really neat. I'm really excited to have these in my collection. So thanks very much to my wife for these. You can probably hear in my voice, I meant to mention this at the beginning, but I've been a little sick. That's why there was no video earlier this week. Usually I do a video on Monday and another one on Thursday. I missed the Monday video. I've been sick. I went to that convention, Terrificon, a couple weekends ago now, and got the con crud at that, and I've been sick ever since. But I'm starting to feel a little bit better enough at least to do this video, but I'm still a little bit chesty, a little bit throaty. But let me show you some of the stuff I got off of Kickstarter, starting with this really cool thing. It's called Archetypes, an independent geek culture magazine. And the idea is basically almost to do sort of like a wizard style thing, but it's for indie, like self-published Kickstarter books. So I got this off of Kickstarter. It's got interviews with other creators like myself. It's also got some comics in it as well. So it's like a third of it is comics, and then there's like 2/3 which are interviews and articles about the craft of making comics. So a really cool idea. Definitely want to support that. There was a variant cover that just was designed to look like an old wizard comic, but I ended up getting the regular one here. So I definitely wanted to support this, sort of build the indie comics community with this sort of thing. So that was really cool. I'm also excited to get these from Roy Johnson. Now, I've mentioned before his book, The Sentinels. I've showed them off a number of times, right? And his comic, The Sentinels, is basically, it's like a late Bronze or Copper Age superhero series. But it's imagining like what a book in the 1980s would have looked like for some of the heroes in the 1940s if they hadn't stopped being published, right? So like the first issue of the Sentinels that was published was issue 267, and it imagines that there were 266 back issues that we just never saw. So I love the idea. There's like this whole universe out there that we just hadn't seen before. Because it really felt to me like when I first started buying comics off the spinner rack, and my first issue of Justice League was like 240, and I was like, ooh, what happened to the first 230 issues? So that's the feeling for me. So he did something really cool where he actually went back and he printed the first issue. So this is the Silver Age book. So it's like this is what the series would have looked like when it was like launching in like 1962 using these Golden Age characters. So it's a lot like Brave and the Bold 28 is basically the idea for this. Sentinels #1. So I love the idea of him going back and filling in these different like sort of key back issues from the run. He also did another Silver Age book, a companion series with a different superhero team. Again, what if these characters from the 40s had been sort of either hadn't stopped being published at all or were being revived like in the Silver Age? And that is the Sensational 7 #1. So again, it's like imagining a book from like 1961. So I just love this sort of thing. I got both of these. I also had as an add-on this Freedom Brigade #0, which is basically sort of like a who's who in the DC universe entries for all of his versions of these Golden Age characters that he's using. So he's got sort of write-ups of their Golden Age history along with like his new versions, the new versions of the costumes that they've redesigned and stuff like that. So it's really cool. Yeah, so I really like what Roy's doing. He calls his company Standard Comics, which itself was a comic book company in the 50s. So he's basically reviving this old comic company, which again is exactly the sort of thing I love to do. With my comics, I do these variant covers where I have like ACG titles and stuff like that I'm reviving. So I love everything about that. So a lot of fun to read those, and Roy's always putting out new stuff on Kickstarter. So if you do buy stuff on Kickstarter, you'll definitely want to check that out. Now, I also had a chance to go to a comic book store that I've been to a couple times before. I've mentioned it a few times before. It's a very famous comic store here in New England. It's Million Year Picnic. which is in Cambridge, right in the heart of Harvard Square. And they have a lot of really, really great back issues there. Now, it's very small space. It's extremely cluttered. A lot of times you can't get to a lot of the regular back issues. But up on the wall, they have a lot of cool wall books, and they had some great stuff there. They had a giant size X-Men #1. They had a Star Spangled War Stories '84, the first Mademoiselle Marie, which is a book that I've never actually seen in the wild. I have a copy that I bought in an auction online, but I've never seen one before at a store or at a convention. It's very hard to find, but they had a nice low-grade copy of that. But I also discovered over in the corner that they had a big section of indie books from the 70s. So like underground comics from like the late 60s all through the 70s. They had a big section of them, and a few things that are more recent as well. And I got a couple things from there. Again, one thing that is much more recent, but I've heard a lot of great things about it, so I had to get this. It's Tales Designed to Thrizzle #2, and by Michael Kupperman. I've heard a lot of good stuff about this series, so I had to buy it. I have read it since I bought it, and I loved it. It was hilarious, so I really loved this. Definitely going to keep my eye out for the other issues. Really a lot of fun. And then the big purchase, they actually had, I think, the whole run of these, but the first issue is a little bit lower grade, so it was a little more in my price range. But a really fascinating book that, again, I've never actually seen in person. I've only heard about, so I had to buy it when I saw it. It is Comix book #1. So for those of you who may not be familiar with Comix book, it's a really wild concept, which is basically Stan Lee at Marvel, early 70s. I think he was the publisher at this point, no longer editor-in-chief. This might have happened during the Roy Thomas years. But Marvel was in the process of starting these oversized black and white magazines. And Stan really liked what was going on with the underground comic scene, and he decided that this would be a perfect way for Marvel to get in on the underground comics action, was to put out their own underground comic, which they could do in a magazine format because they wouldn't have to worry about the Comics Code Authority. So what he did was he teamed up with Dennis Kitchen, who was famous for doing Kitchen Sink Press a little bit after this, but was already well known for publishing underground comics. So he was a big name already in the underground comic scene. So he teamed up with Dennis Kitchen, and Dennis Kitchen was like the editor of the book. And so we have like a Marvel's take on underground comics. Now, I haven't had a chance to read this yet, but my understanding is that even though it was not didn't have to be code approved, it was still being put out by Marvel, so it's a little bit tamer in terms of the content compared to the other underground comics at the time, which had a lot of, transgressive sex material. There's a lot of stuff with drug paraphernalia and all that sort of thing. And I think that's toned down in here. The series only lasted like 4 issues or so. It seems to me as though the underground comics community didn't really embrace it. Now, it's priced at $1, which I think for a full magazine size was probably fine. Like underground comics were more expensive than mainstream comics at the time, so the underground community was already used to paying more money to get the underground stuff. So for a book this size, with the extra pages and the extra size of the pages, it's actually a good deal compared to other underground comics. So I just have a feeling that it was looked at as being a little too corporate by the underground crowd, and then people that weren't into underground comics but were Marvel fans were kind of like, what's this crap? I'm just guessing, but it only lasted 4 or 5 issues and then it ended. But again, fascinating, very strange footnote in Marvel Comics history. And again, I've never seen it before, so for $15, had to pick it up, and I am looking forward to looking through it. Again, they did have issues at least 2 and 3 as well. They might have had issue 4. I don't even want to say for sure that there was an issue 4, but it felt like they had the whole run. But the other issues are $25 because they were a little nicer shape. And I just decided a little too much for me to spend on something that's kind of outside my collecting range, but I had to get that first issue just for the weirdness of it all. Finally, here's something that's really off the beaten path because it's not a comic at all. Just got this in from eBay, but I'll explain why I bought it. It sort of tangentially fits into some of my collection. Here it is. It is the first Nancy Drew book, The Secret of the Old Clock. Now, there's millions of copies of this around, but you'll notice that this is an old vintage copy. This copy was printed in 1948, and the reason that I got this copy specifically is that Nancy Drew enters the public domain on January 1st, 2026. And obviously, with my series, The Crime Busters, which is very much an homage to characters like Nancy Drew and to these sort of teen detective mysteries and stuff like that, when Nancy Drew enters the public domain, I definitely want to use the character. So I've already been thinking about ways that I can use the character and make comics with Nancy Drew in them, right? The tricky part is that this book, which is what will be entering the public domain, and I think that the second book will also be, I'm not 100% sure, but I know this one will be, was significantly rewritten in 1959. And the 1959 version is the version that you can get. So if you're going to go buy a new copy or most used copies or digital copies, they're all going to be the 1959 rewrite, which is not in the public domain. And so you can't use any of the details from the rewritten version because they're still copyrighted. So what's in the public domain is going to be the original version. So I had to find a copy of the book that was printed before 1959. And what I ended up with was this one here, which is printed in 1948. You can see that I put it inside this plastic bag because it is musty. So I'm already trying to figure out how I'm going to read it. I'll probably have to go outside and potentially even wear a mask. It's not like terribly musty, but I'm so hypersensitive to mustiness, as is well documented on my channel previously, particularly right now because I have a chest cold, that I can't really be around the mustiness too much. So I immediately sealed this up in this bag. I'm probably going to seal it a little bit tighter just to make sure, but at some point when I'm feeling a little bit better, I'm going to bring this outside, I'm going to read it, take some notes about how I can adapt some of this material when I decide to make my comic. It's something I need to get working on. I want to have it ready for the beginning 2026. So when she comes in the public domain, I can launch, hopefully in January of 2026. It's tough because I have the, Crime Busters and my series Quest, my fantasy series Quest. I have a lot of stuff going on with those, and it's hard to just find even spaces in my production schedule or my Kickstarter schedule to do anything that aren't those series. And I really don't want to sort of divide my attention, but again, it's just so perfect. I'm going to try and figure out a way to get some of the characters from the Crime Busters in the story or vice versa, so that there's a natural crossover between Nancy Drew and the Crime Busters. It just makes sense to have that take place in the same universe, particularly since I've already used the Hardy Boys in Crime Busters number 6. So anyway, blah, blah, blah. Long story short, I got this cool book. Looking forward to reading it when I have a chance. It should be a quick read. I've read the synopsis of this was originally from 1930. I've read the synopsis of the 1930 version as compared to the 1959 version, so I have a sense of what's different, but I'm really looking forward to digging into the original, seeing it for myself, see what ideas that triggers. So that's what I got this time. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, and I'll see you next time.